Welcome back, everybody. It's the Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast on Fantasy Pros. I'm your host, Scott Bogman. I'm joined, as always, by Pat Fitzmaurice at Fitz_FF on the Twitter machine. And today, it is one of our yearly favorite shows that we do before the draft every single year with one of our favorite guests, Mr. Matt Waldman, the rookie scouting portfolio man. Check out his website over at mattwaldmanrsp.com. The guide is out. It is glorious, as it always is, Mr. Waldman, and thank you so much for joining us on the show once again.
Scott, Pat, I always look forward to getting to do this, and so it's another fun draft year, and I'm just excited about being able to talk about this stuff with you guys and share a lot of the stuff that I spend doing all year quietly watching film. So
yeah, we're gracious to have the chance to talk to you, Matt, especially since I would think after the RSP and the magnitude of that effort that you would just go into hibernation for like 4 months after that. Because I can't imagine you sleep to get that thing out as thorough and as long as it is.
there used to be a time where I really didn't sleep much, and now it's getting a little better. But I would say that it's funny. I have two desires after watching the RSP. It's to lay on my couch and do nothing and watch just like meaningless shows, or go to the park and walk. And then I have the equally strong desire to talk about it, because you're quietly putting all this stuff together, not talking to anybody other than a few people who I bend their ear, who they're gracious enough to let me bend it like I'm an absolute crazy narcissist or something, and I feel that way while that's going on. So it's nice to be able to share this. You put all that work in, and then you want to talk about it, So it's like my wife and I have different jobs, and we're both introverts, but it's funny because she spends all day talking and negotiating with people, and she gets home, she doesn't want to say a word. I spend all day writing and watching film, and I want to talk to somebody. So if you ever see me
she knows a ton about Cam Ward and this whole QB class, is what you're saying.
No, I'm out in the park talking to myself as I'm walking a dog and scaring the bejesus out of people, thinking that I'm probably crazy. So that's really more what's happening.
Well, we can scratch that itch for you today, Matt.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Fitzy, I'm going to hand it off to you. I know you have a nice opening question here for Mr. Waldman.
Yeah, Matt. All right, we know you hate rankings, but Cam Ward is your top-ranked quarterback. Not too controversial ranking, I don't think, but you do raise some concerns about his loosey-goosey backyard style of play and his footwork. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that, and I think it's kind of a foregone conclusion, that he's going to the Titans with the first overall pick? How confident are you that Brian Callahan, Titans offensive coordinator Nick Holtz, and quarterbacks coach Brian Hardigree can smooth out the rough edges in Ward's game?
I'm gonna throw a curveball with the number that I give, which is 0, because those guys aren't going to be working on that. It's going to be up to Cam Ward and his quarterback coach away from the field to actually be the one to do that work. So from what I've seen of his footwork when he moves in the pocket, he has some very good techniques that he uses to stabilize his feet, that for some people may look like it's not good footwork, but it actually is. So he's getting coached, and I'm confident that he will get there. So I would probably say on the scale of 0 to 10, I'm probably like at a 6.5, 7. Probably confident that he's going to get it smoothed out. But year one might be a little bumpier, just because he does run a lot of different things at both Washington State and Miami, but he ran a ton of 4 verts and a ton of RPOs and screens. You don't see a lot of 3-5 step drops with timing on routes that you're going to see in the NFL.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know you mentioned you don't want him to change that whippy throwing style he has, and that you think that can work in the NFL.
Was it one of the cars that had, like, they set the ladders up in his practices and made him throw over the ladders because they didn't like his sidearm delivery? I mean, is that what you're talking about with Cam Ward? Like, just if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, because I was just looking at, there's a good quote from a wide receiver coach forum that I belong to on X, that was talking about, had an interview excerpt from Puka Nacua talking about his routes. and how if you don't get the exact steps at the top of your break, but you're accelerating into the top of your break and you hit that break point right, even if you're not taking the exact number of steps to decelerate into that, it doesn't matter. And in the same way that I would look at Brett Favre back in the day and, being nearly 40 or close to it or over it with the Vikings in the NFC Championship game, and he's still throwing balls with a wider release motion than Tim Tebow ever had. I mean, he literally brought the ball down to his knee and he's getting it done. And I'm like, if you want proof that the real guideline isn't the exact technique of what's done, but what's the purpose of that technique? And are you achieving that purpose with whatever technique you're using? And is it repeatable and something that isn't going to get you hurt doing it? And I would say that with Cam Ward, his release is very fast, even though you could say, imagine how much faster it could be if he made it shorter. But to me, that's wasted time. You could be spending time on other things that he needs to work on, because if it's fast enough doing what he does, then you're just you're risking
Extra
him making
steps.
it worse and taking extra steps. He needs to spend more time reading the field or more time with his drop back footwork so that his timing's perfect on these quick hitting routes in the quick game in the NFL, where he's got to do 3 and 5 step drops from center, or he's got to time it up just right. Because a lot of that timing he's doing with these, when you look at rhythm for a drop back footwork, you could almost say like every number I say is his steps. And I go, you would expect it to be like 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But him, it's so fragmented. It's like 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3. I mean, it's like that all, and you just don't know if he's really got if that timing's going to work. Because you look at Caleb Williams last year, and when Shane Waldron didn't have prescribed footwork for specific drops on specific plays, Williams' accuracy was not good because he didn't know when he should be set to throw the ball and get it out. When Thomas Brown came in and performed mash surgery on that offense and said, here, Caleb, every play is going to have prescribed drop footwork, among other things that they did. Well, Caleb Williams was a near elite producer at the end of the season. So, I mean, some of those things make a difference. And Williams didn't have issues with his footwork in college. Cam Ward, I just don't see him getting to do it enough, because it's like he's wheeling around and throwing balls the minute it's snapped because it's an RPO or screen, or he's buying time on 4 verts where it's like, this is probably going to go off script anyway. So, I mean, it was 2 extremes. You need to see the middle.
Interesting. And Cam Ward has feet arrhythmia. It feels like, like it's not completely balanced, but it is. It works for him, and that's all that matters here. Before I have a question about Jalen Milroe, but before we get to that, I got to remind you guys, if you want a chance to win a signed DeAndre Swift Bears jersey for free, FREE, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com, all you have to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now. Drop a comment below on any Fantasy Pros Dynasty podcast video, and that's it. We will be announcing a winner right here on the podcast, so make sure to turn on those notifications so you can know when the new videos are up and when to claim your prize. So I'm a big fan of Jalen Milroe. Fitzy, I feel like, is a pretty big fan of Jalen Milroe as well. And you seem to be really locking in on him, Matt. I have a quote from the RSP for you. If I were a pivotal decision maker for an NFL team, Jalen Milroe is the only quarterback I'm considering within the first 3 rounds of the draft in this class. I'll take shots on passers available later who have growth potential as journeyman starters or reserves. Maybe one of them surprises us and proves there's a lot more to this game. Otherwise, Milroe is it, period. End of story. You also wrote that Milroe is the best pocket quarterback in the class. Can you give us the sales pitch for Jalen Milroe? Because I've been saying the whole time, this is the guy with the most upside in the class, even though he seems still pretty raw.
Yeah, I mean, it's always funny because I hear always this raw stuff about players. And, I talked about that with Anthony Richardson, and people still say he's raw. And you look at what he did production wise last year, and it would aid their argument to think that, But at the same time, when you look at the offense and the surrounding talent that he's working with, and also how perception could have been different, and like, say, let's take Texans game last year, where his receivers legitimately dropped 7 passes and 3 touchdowns. And, and there were multiple games that were maybe not as egregious as that, but close enough that if their receivers caught reasonably thrown balls that he threw, that we might have seen maybe another 8 to 9 touchdowns and probably added at least 150 yards of passing per game to his average. And we have a very different conversation about him right now. So when you look at Milroe, I mean, Lamar Jackson was considered raw.
Yes.
Lamar, and he was not. Lamar
No.
Jackson played in worked in a pro style offense with Bobby Petrino that Tom Coughlin said was one of the best pro designed offenses in many years. And he was doing VR work before Jaden Daniels probably even knew how to use. Well, Jaden Daniels was in middle school or high school at that point, so he may not have been taking calculus yet. I'll put it that way. But Lamar Jackson was doing VR every morning at Louisville, and was one of the best pocket movers in the class. Well, Jalen Milroe is a lot like Lamar Jackson as a pocket player. Very quiet feet. When he moves, the ball's still in position from the throw. His eyes are downfield. He doesn't try and do a Michael Vick or Kyler Murray thing where it's like he's trying to make the most dynamic move away from pressure. It's like having it's kind of like a trap, like when the pressure springs the trap, does the trap just slowly close the doors down, or smoothly close the doors down, or does the whole trap jump, like those old mouse traps where the whole thing just jumps and flies everywhere? That's more like Kyler Murray and Michael Vick. They don't have quiet feet. And that what ends up happening there is that you break the containment of what still exists with your blocking, and you end up like creating more pressure than you needed to. You also end up forcing your receivers to reroute. So now you're making these dynamic look at me plays. That's not intentional, but that's what happens. Maybe I'd argue with Kyler it's intentional, but it's but I bust on him a lot. But it's they move around a lot, and it looks beautiful when it works out on ESPN. Wow, they've got 8 plays this year that worked out. But as Kyler Murray, how many times have Kyler Murray had 8 wins in a season? I don't think very often, if at all. So when you look at Milroe, quiet feet, and not only that, but he's the only quarterback I've seen in this class who manipulates middle of the field defenders during his second read or after his drop. And he can do it after moving slightly in the pocket and do it while pressure is bearing down on him. So when you integrate skills like that are all difficult to teach, I don't care if his offense may have been a little more basic. I don't care if he went to work with a guy like John Gruden, that he might not know all the verbiage in the West Coast offense that John Gruden knows. And, and I don't care if whether or not that makes him raw. What makes him advanced is the fact that he can do what Alex Smith, who was always seen as advanced, actually looks raw at doing in the past, which is he was a quick processor of identifying the information. He was slow as hell at being able to actually confidently act on it. And you need someone who can confidently act on it. Jalen Milroe confidently acts on what he sees. And when he does it, when he's manipulating, those are special qualities. So for me, the fact that, yeah, he's fumbled the ball a fair bit because he got blindsided a lot with Alabama's offensive line that doesn't look like the Nick Saban era offensive lines. And he doesn't throw fade routes very well. He's got to work on those fade routes and the touch passes, which is legitimate. And he's got to learn more offensive terminology and coverage disguises. But he carved up Georgia, which is the closest thing to an NFL defense, and did it twice. He's carved up Alabama. He has the quickest release I have seen ever studying a player. The only player that I went back and looked at Dan Marino because I was like, is his release as compact as Dan Marino's? And the answer was yeah.
Wow.
It's that compact. And he's got good footwork. He can drop back and move, and he does the prescribed drops and he's reading multiple reads. So to me, if you have all the processing and be able to integrate these pocket management skills and manipulate people at the same time with pressure coming in, I think as an academic Heisman winner, you probably can process information on the Alex Smith level enough to grow. And then that other stuff that you can't teach will continue to proliferate into his game as he gets experience.
Right.
Well, my favorite thing that you can't teach Jalen Milroe is that he works harder than anybody. All of his teammates, all of his coaches say he's first guy in, last guy out every single day. So he is working on his craft to get better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised there isn't more enthusiasm in the fantasy community, considering that even the college football casuals were probably watching the Georgia-Alabama game last year, where Milroe was responsible for almost 500 yards of offense and 4 or 5 touchdowns. Yeah,
And did
It's
we
the same
once
things
mention?
using to describe Richardson are being used to describe Milroe, and I think
Yeah.
people are getting they're getting cold feet on these like super high upside guys.
And I laugh because I'd still take take Anthony Richardson 9 times out of 7. 9 days out of the week. Just because he landed in a situation where maybe he has an owner who thinks he's a member of NSYNC whenever he goes onto Instagram. He's older than I am, and he looks like he's still going through midlife crisis with his image, and that you've got a reactive owner there. So I think that they need to be patient with Richardson. And there was I thought there was much ado about nothing about the whole sideline thing. I mean, even his teammates were like, he should have lied. But this guy, when you're throwing 50-yard passes downfield with pinpoint accuracy with Aaron Donald in your chest as a rookie, and you're carrying defenders on your back like that all the time, you're pretty much the modern day version of what Steve McNair was. I don't think if Steve McNair said I needed a play off, that Brian Baldinger was going to lose his mind.
Took every practice
from
off.
a beach looking like a manatee waiting for a shark to overtake him. And I like Baldy. Baldy's great, but I laugh because one day I do not want to see the GoPro version of the shark coming up behind him, mistaking him for something delicious. So it's but as long as he's talking about Anthony Richardson when it happens, I might have a good laugh, after I mourn him. But the point of the matter is that, yeah, when you look at Milroe, you look at Hurts, you look at Lamar Jackson, it's that subconscious bias, unfortunately, that we still have, where certain black quarterbacks get benched earlier, they get fewer opportunities to try again. They're not Daniel Jones, where they can go somewhere else and get a chance to compete after they've already shown very clearly that they aren't good starters in the league. And so it's not hate. I don't think. I think it's just subconscious bias that sometimes we look at things and we don't realize what we're doing. And I think that, like Bill Polian, I don't think Bill Polian was a racist for saying that, Lamar Jackson was a running back. It was just his view of the game hadn't evolved. And he didn't really recognize the things that he needed to see that. And from people I've talked to in the league, there's probably a good 60% of the league that still wants the Matthew Stafford looking quarterback, and if he can run, that's great, and they're willing to project more and give those guys more time, even if they show that they're more like Daniel Jones than Matthew Stafford.
Before we move off the QBs, Matt, real quick on Jaxson Dart, you seem maybe less than excited about him. And I know you wrote in the RSP that if you have only 10 seconds for a scouting report, it's this quote, if Dart can unlock his accuracy beyond 25 to 30 yards, look out. How he'll do it, good luck, end quote. So what are your concerns with him?
Yeah, it's just that when he needs to reset his feet better so that they're in a better position to be accurate when he moves in the pocket and he's got to fire from there. Can you correct that and that will get better? Yes, if that when your feet are in good position to throw the ball downfield, that you are accurate when you do that. The problem is he's not accurate when he does that. Even when his feet are set, he's not accurate downfield beyond 25 yards when I've charted plays. And so it's scattershot. It's not predictable. It's not like he's always behind or always overthrowing. It's just any old way. It's like Carson Wentz before they put him in pistol. He was struggling with the Eagles because they put him in a drop back game, and anything over 25 yards, he was just scattershot. Once they got his feet set, it was good. The problem is that Dart is in a pistol offense, and it's still happening. But I would love to see him with the Rams, because I think on a team with that kind of offense where he has good footwork to drop back and move around. You can use the play action game, the short passing game across the field, where he's a little better with his accuracy, or it's a little easier than it is on just vertical shots that he misses a lot. And then you can give him time to work that out, because he'll at least be behind Stafford for a year. And if they want to keep Garoppolo for a year or two, it can be functionally helpful for him, even if it's not functionally helpful for the Rams to have Garoppolo. I think Garoppolo has a purpose, but behind two veterans like that, it may give him the best chance to unlock the areas of his games where it's missing.
So you don't want to see it. You don't want to see him in New Orleans.
I do if I'm a Falcons, Tampa, or Carolina fan. I definitely want to see him there. I don't want to see him in Cleveland.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I would love to see him in Cleveland, but I'm a Steelers fan. Let's talk about some running backs here. And I mean, you're not an exception. Everybody thinks Ashton Genty is amazing, so I don't even know how much we need to talk about him. Let's talk about one of your other favorites, Quinshon Judkins. And you wrote in the RSP, the fans underrated Judkins, but the people I know with NFL experience agree with the RSP. Judkins is one of the backs in this draft who can deliver quality starter production in nearly all phases of the position, and he's scheme versatile. Your comps are fascinating. Jonathan Taylor on the high end. On the lower end, you had Chris Carson, Isaiah Crowell. Chris Carson was a good back whose career ended because of injuries here. Crowell is very useful, so that's a pretty high floor for him. But three down backs are a rare species these days. But it seems like you think Judkins can be one of those three down backs.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Taylor's probably. I like to use wide ranges, either wide or narrow ranges for players based on what I see. And so I don't think he's going to realistically reach the Jonathan Taylor ceiling. I mean, Taylor is much twitchier or significantly twitchier than Judkins. But I think Judkins might be a more technically sound all-around runner with more versatility than what Chris Carson was. But I think as runners, they're similar. Powerful, shifty enough, someone with enough burst to work outside on design runs, but you can pound it inside and they can create and they can run a variety of schemes for you. And he has promise as a pass protector as well. And then, that floor with Crowell. I mean, Crowell just honestly, if the biggest problem with Isaiah Crowell was that he was an immature young man who was the number one running back recruited out of high school, who went to the University of Georgia and should have been the first of that long line of Georgia backs that we have seen. He should have, he was that good. He had that kind of Marshawn Lynch-esque quality to his game in terms of the way that he moved between the tackles and the power, the speed he had. But the fact that he went from being an undrafted free agent to the Browns, and they had Deion Lewis get hurt, and they had Jamal Lewis get hurt. He ended up getting a chance, but they were literally like, we didn't really know what we had until the fourth quarter of like the third preseason game, because
he was a battering ram,
and he was. And Crowell was my number one back that year. I put him number one in the RSP in the pre-draft. That's why I like doing what I do, because it's like, I had somebody the other day go on X, and this rarely happens, so it was memorable. But I had somebody on X go, I think this is going to be the last year I'm doing the RSP, because your RBs behind your RB rankings are so far beyond the consensus. It's just mind-boggling to me that you'll get anything right other than Ashton Genty. And that the consensus seems to be that GMs have figured out how to pick running backs. And I'm thinking, well, Isaiah Pacheco was one that they didn't really see coming, but I did. I mean, and I seem to Isaiah Crowell, I put number one overall. I had Isaiah I had Nick Chubb over Saquon Barkley, back in the day, and there were lots of things like that happened. I'm going to miss my share. I had Trey Sermon number one, and that didn't work out at all. And I overestimated some things probably with him, but at the same time, that's just, I like the fact that I can grade players outside of the things that NFL looks at in terms that makes them more risk friendly. And sometimes those risk friendly things they look at, it's kind of like how Wall Street can set up shop with job fairs for Ivy League students who aren't even studying finance or any kind of business, but they'll welcome them because they went to an Ivy League school. Meanwhile, the kid at the University of Georgia who might, basically run circles around them at the business school that I worked at for years, who took finance and who actually could, have those opportunities, has to work much harder to get an in because the Ivy League school hasn't set up a recruiting thing, or the finance the financier hasn't set that up on the University of Georgia campus, and there's good
Yeah.
reasons for why that is on a certain level, but it also means that you create some biases that don't make sense. I want unvarnished looks at talent, and then when we draft, I can say now we have fit. So if I don't like Omarion Hampton as much as everybody else, but he fits on a team where he's not going to have to block and he can be the B back between the tackles, he might give you 1,200 yards as a rookie.
God forbid there's dissenting opinions. You know what I mean? Like, oh my Lord, dissenting opinions, evil. I don't get that at all. So,
Yeah.
but I know Fitzy's got another RB question for you. But before we get to that, I got to tell you guys about RSO. And by now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. If you think it sounds complicated, it's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. If you think you're among the fantasy elite, this is the platform to test your mettle. If you're still not sure, you can test out your general manager skills for free, FREE, in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use the promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. That's promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. I love that you brought up Omarion Hampton because that is an excellent segue. Fitzy.
Yeah, Matt, I've heard Todd McShay say that he thinks there is not that big a gap between Ashton Genty and Omarion Hampton. And it seems like even the people who don't maybe love Hampton as much as McShay does still really like him a lot. But you maybe raised a few concerns. One is that he's maybe not the best accelerator. Can you talk about that and any other issues you might have with Hampton?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like Hampton right now with his grade, if you put him into a lineup and said, we need you to be the starter, he would fare fine. Okay. So if he goes to an RB weak team, which is very possible, he will probably be the lead back or at least the co-starter on a team. As soon as he maybe works on a couple of things that they figure out how to minimize what he doesn't do well. One of those things is pass protection. He has a good success rate right now, but success rates are a nice layer of information that have a lot of holes in it to a certain degree. Because if you're not judging success rate based on how you project to the NFL using projectable techniques that actually a blocker should use, then you're just judging success rate on whether he gets in the way or whether he's in blocking inferior talent that doesn't know how to use their hands, doesn't know how to see when a receiver, when a runner's tipping off his block. And Omarion Hampton drops his head and tips off his blocks a lot. And that means that when you get to the NFL, those linemen and linebackers are going to be able to run around him, grab him by the shoulders and throw him forward, or just can him like he's a center. And that's he's gonna have to work on that. His ball security is enough to be passable, but from the studies I did last year preliminarily, when I looked at 6 years worth of RSP data in recent years, of 6 years of prospects that I've evaluated, if they didn't meet the baseline expectation for ball security rates, um, only 10% of them ever got one season of RB2 value. Only 3% of them only got RB top 10 value as an RB once. So I'm going to go back and do some more work looking into that. But he's closer to that baseline value than I'd like to see him. Needs to get a little better, especially as a power runner between the tackles who's going to be, who's going to be
In
doing a lot of
traffic.
work in tight traffic. And speaking of that, when he gets those big runs with that 4.48 speed or whatever it is that he had for his size, that sounds great as an athlete, and it is. But he's running it against air. And when you see him on film doing it, it's great when he gets a big runway and he has no linebackers that had angles on him early in the play. When he's running through the tackles and there's linebackers and safeties that have angles on him, he never gets to the secondary, or rarely does, because he's got elite speed. He's got on the cusp of starter acceleration, more of a committee level type of acceleration, which is good enough, but not great. So I think of like Latavius Murray, who had great speed, but how often did he break away? And how often did he get big time yardage? And you'd say, well, he's been in the league for a long time, and he was, but he was never the star that people made him out to be. And that's kind of there's a bit of a floor there for him as a result of that.
Where would you like to see him go, Omarion Hampton, for like immediate success to start?
It's a great question. I think that maybe as a B back, I think,
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, he could probably be helpful, but he's not going to give you like 1,200 yards. He'll probably, with Chase Brown there, he could be a 600 to 800 yard back and show promise in that regard. That could be worthwhile. I think in Oakland, not Oakland, but Las Vegas, you could probably see a scenario where he could work his way into that, and they can get another back later who's more of a scat back type if they don't give Dylan Lobby a second chance in there to do anything, because they let him have one carry, fumbled, and then he never saw the field again. So we might see a little bit more there. That could be an option. So there's a couple. Cleveland, I think, has a decent enough offensive line where he could work out on a team like that, and they could use Ford as more of the A back to his B back.
Interesting. I'm gonna be Denver is where everyone puts him, and it just feels like there's no way he ends up there. So we'll see where he goes. But Matt, I'm a huge fan of Cam Scadaboo, and do you share my enthusiasm? I love watching this guy. I know that there are questions. And you even mentioned the RSP. There's off the field questions about him being Johnny Manziel-esque in terms of being a frat boy and all of that, but you don't care about that. We're just looking at the work that he did. The juice, I heard Daniel Jeremiah talking about that. The NFL is probably lower on him than most evaluators are, because they're not sure if he has the juice. I don't know what more they need to see. I saw him walk all over my Longhorns defense, and most of those guys are going to be pros in the NFL this year. Works well in traffic. I think he has enough burst to do it. I see a guy that can carry a heavy workload, work in traffic, and run people over. He's one of, I was going over this with Fitzy and Wormeli in the background, one of like 3 players to break 100 tackles, according to like PFF's numbers and all of that, over the last, like, however long they've been putting those numbers together. So, what are your thoughts on Skattebo, and where do you want to see him end up?
As a pure runner, he's as good as any runner in this class not named Ginty. That's that's it. Now, if you're going to add what a running back also has to do oftentimes in their role, which is pass protect, then that pass protection is what brings him down, because right now he leads with his head. Literally will try and Earl Campbell circa LA Rams highlight run his head into you, and he tips off a lot. He's really deficient as a pass blocker, but he can fix that. So if he fixes it, And he gets slightly better at ball security. He could easily be one of my top 2 to 3 backs on my board right now. So yes, I like him a lot. I think I think the comparisons to David Montgomery are very good comparisons. As long as I'm busting on Todd McShay, but I mean, listen, Todd's been doing this a long time, and he covers things differently. He's got to cover a wide expanse of players. But I remember his much fabled, um, you know, he's got the feet of Saquon Barkley, the body of this, the arm of that, and it was like a Frankenstein of every Hall of Fame player in existence. So, and that was for Montgomery. And then when Montgomery just showed that he was just a good running back, but he didn't have juice, everybody lost their minds, especially in the fantasy community. And now look at him. Knuckles is doing pretty well in Detroit, and he was doing pretty well at the end of his career in Chicago too. I still have Chicago Bears analysts who are like, I know one over at TTNL, Phil Otoshian, who I really enjoy the work that he and Shane Marsaw do. And Phil's like, I can tell that Phil wants Cam Scadaboo there again because he's hoping that he can replace his binky that was David Montgomery. And I agree. I think the worst case scenario for him is that he just tends to be more like Ontario Smith in the off-field department, who, if you remember Ontario
the
Smith,
Wizinator.
yeah, the Wizinator, because he had higher aspirations, pun intended, and I think that's nowadays, I think that, if that's all that is, it won't be as big of a deal because the NFL drug tests in a way that you've really got to be immature and frankly dumb to not navigate around that test to play. And that's all the NFL's doing, whether they're going to deny it vigorously. But that's what they're doing is like, we're doing it for optics, and you've got to be an idiot to not pass this.
Matt, I know you like Damien Martinez quite a bit and refer to him as maybe one of the safest running backs in the class. What I like about Damien Martinez is that he played at somewhere between like 215 pounds, 225 pounds in college, but he moves like he's 195 pounds. Like he kind of gave me a Le'Veon Bell vibe in that regard. What do you like about him?
Yeah, he's a smooth accelerator like that. And when you watch him at Oregon State, they ran a lot of outside zone and toss plays. And you don't do that if you're not confident in your guy's ability to get the top speed quickly. And he does that well. He's also at Miami, they used him more as a grinder between the tackles, inside the tackles. And he excelled there. He was a determined runner with good contact balance, strong feet. He can mitigate losses and be able to keep the play on schedule. And he showed a propensity for soft hands. Now, he only had 32 receptions in his career, but James Conner only had 30 at Pitt, and same with Jonathan Taylor. I think he only had 42 career. So, it's not, we can't judge by the volume. We got to judge by the quality, and the quality's there for him. So yeah, he's one of those guys that I just say, like James Conner, maybe they're different type of runners to a certain degree. He's going to be there forever. He might find a second team because of an old first team might, scapegoat him a little bit, Scott, with their offensive line not being all that hot, and then they get all enamored with Benny Snell.
Benny Snell. Oh.
Yeah. Remember that Monday night game
I
where people
do, against the
declared Benny
Giants.
Snell as like the next starter, and
James Conner gets hurt again.
Yeah.
He runs against, the ghost of Giants past. It was all super young and old guys. And now Benny Snell, he's only a battering ram. That's all he ever was.
Yeah. And meanwhile, James Conner has kept himself in great shape since then, and he's holding off Trey Benson,
Right.
So I think if I were to make a bet, and it's obviously a long shot bet with running backs in general, with how crazy their careers are. But if there's a guy I'd bet 10 years later, we're looking at him going, he might be one of the best backs we've got out of this class. He's just so consistent. He's never going to give you 1,500 yards, but he's giving you like 11 to 1,300 yards every year and getting you 8 to 12 touchdowns. And you're going, he's one of those guys that you just feel great getting as your running back too, because he can give you running back one value. It's going to be him.
He's going to go so late in rookie mocks, I feel like, and he's just going to be he might be the best value of this class because of what he can do and all the hype around everybody else in front of him. So yeah, I like that call out on Damien Martinez. Before we get to another running back question here, I got to tell you guys about our draft coverage. Watch the first round of the NFL draft live with our experts breaking down every single pick. Get instant fantasy reactions and team fits from Joey P, Pat Fitzmaurice, Derek Brown, myself, and others as the draft unfolds. Coverage starts on Thursday, April 24th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel at youtube.com/fantasypros. Mr. Waldman, you have a big crush on Tahj Brooks, who has been flying under the radar. He seems like a guy NFL coaches are really going to appreciate because of how many things he can do well and because of his potential as a third down back who can catch and block. Please explain the nickname Lemonade for us here.
Yeah, because mitigating losses is a big important part of running back play, as I mentioned. And I joke that that Texas Tech's offensive line was really like a lemonade stand, where the defenders could just grab all the lemons and just start throwing them at Tahj. Okay, there's so much penetration into the backfield early against Texas Tech. Blocks that weren't met, guys falling down, just blocks not getting completed, that Brooks oftentimes had to take the lemons that defenses were throwing at him and turn them into lemonade. So I nicknamed him Lemonade because he mitigates losses so well like that. And then there's another back who did that really well, and that was Frank Gore. And when you look at Frank Gore's metrics, wasn't unbelievably fast after 2 torn ACLs, but he still had that acceleration and short area change of direction that had, I think it was Jerry Coker or Larry Coker. Was it Larry Coker? Yeah, Larry Coker saying when he was the recruiter at Oklahoma State, when he and the running back guy who basically coached Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders, that when Frank Gore came out, he said that was the best high school running back I ever saw, was Frank Gore. And I saw early Frank Gore at Miami, and it was like watching Barry Sanders with more power. He was unbelievable. But you look at Tahj Brooks, and you see that he mitigates a lot of losses and keeps the playbook open. He can run through you. He's got very good contact balance. He's got the best direct contact balance score of any of the backs in this class. He can literally. He's not going to do it every play. He's not Earl Campbell, but he can run through direct hits from defensive linemen on occasion, and that's rare. He does that. He's someone that also can run around you. He has very good vision. He processes information well, and when he gets to the second level, he can still use that quickness and efficient movement to turn a 10-yard gain into a 30-yard gain. And he's a good blocker. He's not NFL good yet, but he's going to be NFL good. Like he can block defensive linemen and defensive ends and linebackers through the gaps, and he diagnoses reasonably well the disguises the NFL will throw at him. He'll have to work at, but the ability to punch and square is all there, and he catches well. So when I look at all that, seeing him lose 15 pounds like Bell did between years 1 and 2 of being a Steeler, and I was high on Le'Veon Bell at Michigan State because I was like, it's not the speed, it's the acceleration and the short area change of direction. Well, Tahj Bell scores at the combine for those two areas in those workouts were nearly the same as Gore and Bell.
Wow.
And then he lost 15 pounds. He was doing it at 230, lost 15 pounds so that he could run a 4.5 240, which is still not bad considering that Le'Veon Bell was slow-ish, Frank Gore was slow-ish, and Arian Foster was 4.65. So I mean, I think this is a guy that you're probably going to see in the 6th or 7th round, if not as a UDFA, who could make a team, contribute, and then maybe even start. And if I'm wrong, well, I tend to have some sort of bias in favor of running backs with the last name Brooks, whether it was Kennedy Brooks, Chris Brooks, who I still think Chris Brooks looks pretty darn good, and I rated him lower than I rated Tahj, but Tahj is a guy that I think really could fit.
Oh, as a Packer fan, I will cape up for Chris Brooks. Matt, I think he was one of the finds, and now it's almost like, what are they going to do with what's his name? The guy they
Lloyd?
drafted. Yeah, MarShawn Lloyd
MarShawn
after
Lloyd.
you know, like he basically
Tell him
had
to
the
hold
red
on to the
shirt.
ball.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good
Third
point.
round too.
Good point. Well, Matt, we have to segue from running backs to wide receivers. I think I have a pretty good guy to discuss for that transition. You included Savion Williams with the running backs and the wide receivers. It seems like you're pretty high on him, but like he's just such a weird guy to classify. So I'll give you another scale of 1 to 10 question. On that scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that Savion Williams ends up in some sort of role that would make him a worthwhile dynasty asset?
I would say a 5.5 to a 6 out of 10. And I'm probably being a little bit conservative based on where I have him scored in both wide receiver and running back scoring. It's just I don't know how teams are going to potentially screw that up or make it great. That's not my biggest. If I was confident that a team would handle him right, I'd put him more like at a 7 or 7.5. But yeah, I mean, as a receiver, I think people logo scout and go, "Oh, it's Quinton Johnston part 2." And it's like he drops some balls a little bit, but the reason for the drops is important, the context. And his are generally are focus drops, where he's just so can't wait to get downfield and show people what he can do, kind of like Terrell Owens early in his career, that, that's correctable. And then sometimes he has some difficult extensions where he has to clap onto the ball rather than keep his hands together. And almost every NFL receiver does that and has drops because of that. So it's not massive an issue. It's not like he doesn't know how to track the ball like Johnston with certain types of throws. And then he runs decent routes. You saw him against Texas 2 years ago, Scott. He made some big plays against those Longhorns.
Yes,
You
he
know,
did.
in tight coverage, in the red zone, clutch situations, can run decent routes. And then it just so happens while he's more limited as a running back, on using the wildcat and gap plays, well, the NFL offenses are now embracing a lot more gap because defenses are spread out a lot and they are a lot lighter and faster. So when you run gap plays, you can run through those guys and overpower them. And he's really good at that. So if you base an offense with him doing the Cordero Patterson gap type of work that we've seen within Patterson in Atlanta, a few years ago, you're looking at a player who could give you that kind of ceiling as a running back. He's got a higher ceiling for me as a running back than as a receiver, but a good enough ceiling as a receiver to actually be a contributor starter.
Yeah, Matt, since he does have that weird Cordero Patterson profile, if you were a betting man, would you bet that his first team tries him at running back or wide receiver?
I'm going to bet on what I would do, and I would probably say I would bet on him as a running back. But I think if I'm the New England Patriots, who doesn't know what an X receiver looks like and is just learning to figure out what a flanker looks like, I would say, here's an X. You can use him on fly sweeps. You can use him on RPOs. You can let him go down the field and win some fade routes and run some routes for you. And he's not going to be your favorite receiver because Josh McDaniels, the slot receiver, is your number 1 receiver. The tight end's your number 2 receiver, and your running back's your number 3 receiver. So he can get a little time to acclimate. And if it doesn't work out, you can stick him in wildcat packages with Ramondre Stevenson. And when Stevenson leaves, then you can make him your full-time running back, and he didn't waste a pick.
The CK and I, who writes for Fantasy Pros, we're working on a 7-round mock right now to come out on Monday, and we put him in San Francisco as the Deebo replacement. I think they know how to use a guy with this skill set already, and I think we should be pushing him more towards Deebo than Quinton Johnston. He has more skills than Quinton Johnston does. So
it's a good comp.
Good. I'm glad to hear that from you. So appreciate that. Let's talk about one of my favorite wideouts here. And I feel people are knocking him because of his down 2024, but also the offense was down for Missouri in 2024, and that's Luther Burden. He is I love your comp of Rashee Rice. I think that makes a ton of sense. But one of the other comps you had for him was Brandon Ayuk. Can you tell us more about that comp and what you like about Burden?
Yeah, sure. What was hilarious is that I was on JJ Zachariason's podcast and we were talking about it, and he told me that Matt Harmon also had a Brandon Ayuk comp for him. And I was like, good, because I respect Matt's work a lot and we come from different perspectives with certain things. So sometimes we fill in each other's gaps with certain things of what we do analytically. But the reason Brandon Ayuk is that, there's a lot of talk about, oh, well, if you just look at his yards per route run and you look at the RPO and the screens and how often he's used in the short area of the game, he might be a Mecole Hardman type player. And as I joke with people, if Luther Burden is Mecole Hardman, I'm John Coltrane. Okay? So that is no. So I can play some John Coltrane songs, but I'm not John Coltrane. I'm about 2 universes away from that. But the thing is that you look at Burden and they look at volume when they're doing the scouting of that type of nature. And so models can sometimes lose context of how you project. And because they're saying, well, if it all comes out in the wash, but then you get these wonky ass ideas of that he's Mecole Hardman out of that wash, and you say maybe you should use a different detergent and a different machine. But to me, it's because when you watch Luther Burden, he runs crisp routes, he can separate the line of scrimmage, he knows what type of techniques to use at the right time. He's skilled at uncovering downfield in man-to-man coverage when plays go off script. He can bait defenders last second to uncover late in contested situations, in compressed areas of the field, like Ladd McConkey did so well with Justin Herbert, and had Herbert and May going, this dude runs routes and is on the same page with me like a veteran. That's an NFL receiver. The technique, the conceptual understanding. Oh, and by the way, yeah, he's miles ahead of anybody else as a runner after the catch, as a wide receiver. You know who also got pegged as he's an RPO player. He's basically Rashee Rice, at best, but at worst, he's just this gadget player who we're going to give the ball in the short range of the field and might as well call him Wan'Dale Robinson. You know who also was given that model? Brandon Ayuk, because all he did at Arizona State was run RPO screens, slants, and occasional play action deep passes. And people were like, I don't know. And Brandon Ayuk's one of the better route runners in the league. And
he's a technician.
Yes. And so is Burden. And Burden can play all 3 positions. So if you want him to be, if you want him to be a split end with the New England Patriots, he could do that really well. If you want him to be a flanker with the New England Patriots, he could do that really well too. And they could see what those 2 positions actually look like. And then if they just decide they're so obsessed with him being a slot, well, he could do that too. So if they want to put him in that lead role, he could do that. But hopefully some other team will take him rather than yelling Josh.
Matt, I have a big man crush on Elic Ayomanor, and I feel like you are about to splash me with cold water. So go for it, brother. Tell me why I might be too high on Ayomanor.
Sorry, man. I hope that you got a towel. So Ayomanor, physically, he's definitely the athlete that you're looking for there. And then he runs some good routes in terms of like stems. His stem work is good, and there's some good technique, sound technique there. But you don't see him separating very well against man coverage and maintaining it. And his catch point stuff needs a lot of work. There's just a lot of fighting the ball or mistracking the ball and issues at the catch point that just kind of derail his game. So it's really pretty on the front end, and then the back end is but his hands, he's a but his hands kind of person. We'll put it that way.
Fair.
Yeah.
Ooh, Quentin Johnston-esque, but his hands. I mean, it wouldn't be a show with me on it unless I asked you about some Texas players here. So, but you seem to have a little enthusiasm for my Texas wideouts here, Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond. And a lot of the guys who do the statistical models for prospects like J.J. Zachariason, whose show you were just on with Scott Barrett, they're not very high on Golden. You seem to like him. You also seem to like Bond, who seemed to fall out of favor in the Dynasty community because he didn't run a ridiculous 4.2 that he opened his mouth about, which should have never. If he just doesn't say that, no one, I mean, obviously he has the off-field stuff now, but I don't think people were going to be as mad when he under-delivered on that promise. But what are your thoughts on these two Longhorns?
Well, I'm going to start with a quick little story about Sha'Carri Richardson, the gold medal sprinter. Okay, where I think she was coming off of some sort of layoff, and she had to race the trio of Jamaicans, and she got beat by such a long amount distance that it looked like she might as well not even be a track athlete, And I remember they interviewed her afterwards, and she goes, "I'm happy because I just came off of a layoff. I was still getting the back of things, swing of things. They all know I'm the fastest woman in the world, and they know I'm going to prove it down the line here. So they can keep talking all their smack after this one event right now, but just wait." And at the Olympics, they had her lined up in the 9th lane, which is like not the lane you want to be in a 100-meter race, and she won. She won the gold in that. So I'm going to say that to say this. You look at Isaiah Bond to start with, and yeah, he opened his mouth and said he's going to run a fast time. And yes, the difference between like a 4.2 and a 4.32 and a 4.22, they showed Xavier Worthy being like 2 steps ahead of Calvin Austin, on that. Sure, that's fine. But everyone can have a bad day in that department. All I know is that when I watch that dude on the field, he's the only receiver that you can look at in this class and go, that's some legitimate acceleration. Like, watch it, and like, you don't have to like study him against other players, making sure that you're looking at the time.
He was still the fastest in the gauntlet, wasn't he?
Yeah. So the dude can move. His functional movement is among the best, if not the best, in the class. And it's not just that. It's about how well you use that speed with your routes. There are a lot of fast guys who tip off their routes because they got to slow down too much or move their body in a way to tip off what they're doing at the top of a stem. And a defender's like, I'm just going to sit on this all day and attack it because I know you're not going deep on me once I see those shoulders come up. Isaiah Bond accelerates into his breaks better as well as anybody in this class. And on top of that, he can win contested catches. He can uncover late. That Auburn game, was it the Auburn? Yeah, when he was at Alabama, and Alabama-Auburn game on a 4th and long at the end of the game, Milroe throws the ball across the opposite field to the back left corner of the end zone, and Bond literally has to bait the defender in 2 different directions with the ball in the air to uncover and make the play in the corner. That's a very T.Y. Hilton-esque kind of play. That's an Isaac Bruce type of play back in the day. Now, I don't know if Bond's ever going to become Isaac Bruce, but I think he's a lot closer to T.Y. Hilton, who could double as a primary receiver on the outside if you need him to. But if you put him on a team where he's the slot, the big play slot, he's going to be
got Reggie Wayne. Yeah.
So that dude's great. It's just a matter of, we've got the off-field stuff, and he's probably going to fall, and whether teams feel like he's going to be exonerated, or even if he's not, but like, but still get away with whatever's going on to the point that he's going to get an opportunity to still be on the field. If you feel like this is someone that can grow from the experience that they had, and the justice system doesn't go any further than what we're seeing, then yeah, if you're from a pragmatic perspective, you'd probably say he still can be a good player and a good value as long as he stays mature. You look at Golden, and I think also another one, yards per route run, looks like Mecole Hardman, and that's another one where I go, watch the route.
Yeah.
I would like to see some guys who look at the modeling part. Maybe what would be beneficial for them is to actually learn some. I would recommend this if you're one of those modeling people out there, and I'm not trying to bash you in any way. You guys do great service out there, but if you want to learn more about wide receiver play, and you feel like that you can trust what I'm saying about that, go to YouTube and go look up Drew Lieberman, the sideline hustle. He coaches pro receivers. He's done it for a long time. And he has a list of all sorts of techniques that you can watch on YouTube for no more than 30 seconds to a minute. And you can start writing them down and learning what those techniques look like. So then you can recognize what good technique is. So if your model doesn't fit what the player looks like on the field, and you start to say, well, maybe my model is being too high or too low on this, you can look at those techniques, because Golden has good technique as a route runner. He catches the ball well. He can win contested plays. He's just used in the manner where they use the speed as a bully pulpit. If you have a guy in college who can run a 4.29 and is good after the catch, you're going to put him in those situations as a bolster of the running game, especially when in college football, you don't see press coverage a lot. You don't have, you can just put guys on the field, and you don't have to do so much. You can keep it simple. Let's put it that way. And a lot of college teams keep it simple with wide receivers. That's why there's a lot of wide receivers who fail in the NFL, because they don't have all those techniques that Golden does have. They just have the skills that he does. And then when he gets leveraged in that way, everybody's like, oh, he's going to be awesome. And
he made me think Donovan Smith was a legit prospect here for a little
bit. Right.
And he got benched at Houston. So coming over to Texas was outstanding. I love watching him.
Yeah, without doubt.
Yeah, last question, Matt. A lot of people think Tyler Warren is Superman, and you stepped on Superman's cape a little with your evaluation. Why do you think everyone should maybe pump the brakes a little with Tyler Warren?
They should pump. Yeah, I mean, he's tight end 5 for me, and his score is one of that. If you put him in a lineup and you minimize his weaknesses and you maximize his strengths, he can be productive. He could probably give you 500 to 700 yards in an offense where he's used as Tyler Kraft. Okay. Flat routes, off of play action, let him rumble. Okay. But when you actually watch his game and not look at his stats, what you see is a player who can make contested catches, and he can reach away from his body and move his body really well to win the ball. Great skills. Okay. He's also someone that after the catch, if you give him a runway downhill, he can run through people and run over them. Awesome stuff. I just described a combination of Michael Mayer and Tyler Kraft. Now, Michael Mayer was given a Superman kind of look too, but all I saw him being able to do was win in zone or in a compressed area of the field and man to man. But if you ask him to be Brock Bowers, a guy who can line up against cornerbacks and safeties and linebackers, and he can win after the catch and turn a 20-yard gain into a 60-yard gain, and really break the game wide open and do the contested stuff and make people miss in the backfield and run through them. That's a lot different than Warren. Warren's more Mike Gesicki in that department. I know that he was used as a quarterback / wildcat kind of guy at Penn State, where you can run behind the line and play rugby a little bit. He's a good rugby scrum kind of guy at the college level, but that doesn't translate to dynamic movement in the open field. And then when you watch him block, he's not a puncher. He hugs. He's not I don't get he's a great blocker. He gets in people's way right now. But in the NFL, defensive ends, even safeties have better hands than some of the defensive linemen that you see in the college game. And they're going to be able to just rip and run right through him if he's hugging, or they're just going to call holding penalties, because if he's hugging that effectively, they're going to see that. So can he get better in those areas? Absolutely. But is he going to ever be a better athlete on the move to make the first and second person miss in the open field and be that dynamic guy Brock Bowers is? No. So why on earth would you score him on a Brock Bowers level when he's not that guy? Brock Bowers is Superman of the tight end position, and this, he's more like Aquaman. So.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tyler Warren, but I agree with you 100% in that sentiment of I just I don't think that he is anywhere close to Brock Bowers. I don't think anybody really is. So, yeah, I think this, top 5 hype, people have been going to Jacksonville. I don't know. I think 10 is probably closer to where he needs to go. But Mr. Waldman, is there any prospect, before I let you promote all your stuff, of course, but is there anyone that we didn't talk about that that you're over the moon about, or that people are way too high on, or any other point that you want to make before we let you go? Because we only get you this one time before the draft.
Well, I'll bring up another tight end that I just like that I think isn't getting as much love as I think the NFL will love on him a little more than I think the community has, and that's Mason Taylor, the LSU tight end. I don't think LSU had to utilize him at the levels that they did until last year because they had Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. But when you watch his game, he's smooth. He's got a lot of finesse. He's a good route runner, but he's also very physical, and he's a better blocker than Tyler Warren right now. And he's my number 2 tight end on the board. I could see a team getting him, and he could be like a Mark Andrews with a little better blocking skill if it's the right fit. I don't know if he'll get that fit, but he reminds me a lot of Mark Andrews in the middle of the field. So that's the one I like.
It's too bad the Miami Dolphins basically need an entirely new offensive line and an entirely new secondary, because it would be so much fun to see Mason Taylor go where his dad, Jason Taylor, and his uncle, Zach Thomas, played.
Right? I'm with you.
Don't rule it out. It's still McDaniel there. So it's definitely not to be ruled out. But yes, please, Mr. Waldman, promote everything that you're doing right now. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us here.
And thanks for having me here. And, I'm not going to stretch this out past a certain mark unless you want me to flip the bird at your producer, but we will, but I think you guys like him and probably are very happy with him. So, we'll put it this way. The RSP is in its 20th year of publication. It's very well known as a big part of the Dynasty community, and I'm very appreciative of that. Over the years, it's rooted in best practice principles that I learned as in operations and quality management a lifetime ago. And I use that information to just become more and more adept at football, to the point that the RSP is also something that I've been able to consult with a variety of people related to the league, including quarterback coach Will Hewlett, who's done work at Cortex with Tom Gormley on quarterback prospects like Brock Purdy, Caleb Williams, Anthony Richardson. I've provided scouting reports on them pre-draft for them, and do that work. And it's a big thing for the media. So you get a pre-draft, as we've talked about, and why I like doing the pre-draft. You get the post-draft that gives you a rankings cheat sheet that gives you kind of sweet spot value. So when I have some crazy ranking of some guy you disagree with, like say Lad McConkey over Marvin Harrison Jr., and I say McConkey's going to be one of the 15 best receivers even in redraft this year, and Harrison might not even be in the top 36 if he's fighting to get there. You can tell me I'm an idiot, but I can tell you where you can draft both those guys and make sure that you've gotten the best value without overreaching or waiting too long. And then, I have my own podcast, the RSP Cast, where I have various guests like Brandon Angelo, who's a co-host with me. Bob Harris and I have a profane show we do on Mondays that people enjoy, where we curse all we want to, and the title's cursing. So we have a good time there. And also, Football Guys, great group of folks. And I've been working there as a senior staff writer since 2009.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have to get you on after the draft to see how you like the landing spots for all of these players and who is moving up and down your fantasy board. So appreciate you once again, and we will see you guys next week. Take it easy, everybody.